I took a risk and brought my daughter to the annual company party just so she could have a nice meal. Who knew the big boss would be all about joining in with us and ended up sitting at our table. My daughter kept blinking her big eyes at him, and he looked back at her. She suddenly turned to me and said, "Mom," and then seriously asked the boss, "That's my mom, why don't you call her mom too?" Everyone at the table turned to look at me and the boss. I quickly covered her mouth, laughing awkwardly. Kids say the darndest things. Nina wriggled free and pointed at some coworkers, innocently saying, "Aunt Mandy and Uncle Leo also call you Mom." Mandy and Leo were just interns, but I'd invited them over for meals a few times because I noticed they always ordered takeout. They were beyond grateful, even tearfully calling me Mom. I quickly picked up Nina and headed for the door. "Excuse us, the little one needs the bathroom." Nina struggled to talk, but she's still small, so she couldn't resist. "Nina, what did you promise Mom when we left the house?" I had her stand straight against the wall, totally serious. "Just eat and don't talk." She pouted and started to whine, "Sorry, Mom. I'm so hungry. No funny talk when we go back." I tweaked her tiny ear, and she agreed with a grimace. I thought the boss would have left by now, but nope, he was still there. My colleagues quickly tried to smooth things over, saying I should eat more 'cause the food was getting cold. While I was eating and watching over Nina, I noticed a piece of rib suddenly appear on her plate. Before I could thank whoever it was, Nina squealed, "You're not using chopsticks properly, that's not sanitary." Everyone looked over quickly and saw the boss hadn't pulled his chopsticks back yet. Then they just looked down again like nothing happened. The boss coughed a couple of times, took back the rib, and used communal chopsticks to serve Nina properly. The little girl nodded with satisfaction and offered George a piece of beef in return. It's only polite. The two of them seemed to be in some kind of program, going back and forth, taking care of each other. I felt a bit embarrassed, but I also took the chance to eat plenty, feeling pretty content. Halfway through, George had to leave for something, and the whole table seemed to relax. Leo sighed, "Helen, I was getting indigestion from the tension." "Me too." Mandy quickly chimed in, "I was too afraid to eat." Looking at the way Nina was happily eating, I couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. We got home really late, and Nina, after a whole day of fun, fell asleep as soon as she hit the pillow without me having to coax her. After showering, I got in bed and my phone lit up with a message saying, "Come over." Once I made sure Nina was sound asleep, I headed to the unit next door. Before I could even attempt the fingerprint lock, the door swung open, and a pair of strong arms pulled me inside and pinned me at the entrance. He was gently nuzzling my nose and teasingly gave me a peck. "Mom?" I flushed crimson. "She's just a kid." He smirked, raising an eyebrow like he was mulling something over. "In some ways, she's not wrong." Then, suddenly, he lifted me, and next thing I knew, it was already 8 a.m. I hurriedly got dressed, worried that Nina would be scared if she woke up and couldn't find me. George was leaning on the headboard. "I've already got someone watching your place." "Who?" I asked. He frowned. "Your adopted kids at the company." My phone rang the next second. Mandy's voice came through, "Helen, Nina's still asleep. You don't need to worry while you're on your trip. I'll look after her." Knowing someone was watching over Nina eased me a bit, and I slowed down. George embraced me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Since you're awake, let's get moving." George was heading out for a business trip and had to catch a flight at noon, but before leaving, he had someone deliver me a lunch. The clock on the wall showed 6, and I brought ribs back home, calling Nina and Mandy for dinner. Last night was an exception. George typically doesn't keep me overnight. Our relationship is very discreet. He's the exec on top, and I'm the unremarkable admin assistant. He's going on a 3-month stint, and I feel an unprecedented sense of relief. Each month on the 1st, he sends me some money, but this time he gave me 6 months' worth. I took the money to treat Nina to the buffet she'd been wanting. George hasn't skimped on me, but there will come a day when he's tired of me. When that day comes, I'll take Nina and leave City H for our hometown. Though it's not as fancy as City H, the educational resources are decent, and more importantly, we can live without being on edge. I'm relieved Nina looks a lot like me right now, showing no signs of George. But as she's getting older, her little quirks remind me so much of George's, making me a bit uneasy. Having Nina was a total accident, anyway. 6 years ago, I was new at the company. Amy was on a business trip, so I tagged along with George for a client meeting, and he was drugged. At that time, I just graduated, and my grandmother was really sick and needed surgery. Gritting my teeth, I got into bed with George, hoping to blackmail him later. But before I got the chance, I got a call from the hospital saying my grandmother had passed. I rushed over, exhausted, but missed reliving my last moments with her. Without money, I didn't even have a say in where she was buried. Relatives chipped in later, buying her a resting place in our hometown cemetery. 3 days later, back at the office, Amy told me not to dwell on things and just go with the flow. I smiled and agreed but had already prepared a resignation letter. After what happened, getting fired would have been a gift. Worse, I could have gone to jail. Surprisingly, nothing happened, and the company even transferred me to City A for training. I was uneasy and asked around why they'd want me elsewhere. Amy assured me it was a good thing, that there was nothing to worry about. Later, I found out George was set up by the head of the branch office in City A. This woman had been after George for a long time and threatened to jump if he didn't marry her. George called her parents, who apologized by giving George some land. Priya, working closely with George, filled me in. She was related to George's family, used to work at HQ, then got transferred to the branch. You know this girl who tried to trap George? Another coworker winked at me, and I acted shocked, asking if they had any other girls lined up after me. Didn't they have cameras? I asked, feigning curiosity. She's smart, disabled all the cameras on the way, another colleague, cool and composed, replied. If George hadn't stood firm, we'd all be eating wedding cake by now. I let out a long sigh. The resignation letter can be torn up. You got lucky, some of my coworkers joked. The branch is small, but there's still room to maneuver. I just smiled and stayed quiet. Not long after I moved to City A, I found out I was pregnant. My first thought was to have an abortion. But I longed for a family, for companionship. I was torn and finally decided to keep the baby. Looking back, I was quite lucky. Just days after finding out I was pregnant, another coworker came to City A for training, helping ease my workload significantly. By the time I returned to headquarters, Nina was already talking. My coworkers were surprised to see me with a child. I made up a story about getting engaged in City A, and then my fiancé tragically died in a car accident. They all expressed their sympathy, saying having a child can give someone hope. I pretended to smile through the pain. As for me and George, he was the one who approached me. He said adults have needs, and since I already had a kid, he didn't expect me to be clingy like younger girls. He also promised to move me to a nicer neighborhood and give me extra money each month. I stared blankly into his eyes, speechless. Not enough, Helen? He asked. It wasn't a lot, but for me and Nina, it was more than enough. Not too little, I replied, trying to be fair. He gave a low chuckle. Don't worry, you'll come out ahead. George mentioned he wanted some home-cooked food. As soon as I read the message, I felt irritated. I had promised Nina I'd steam fish that night, so there was no way I was going to meet him. Not long after I sent the refusal, the doorbell rang. Nina eagerly shouted as she ran to open the door, "Nina milk tea. Nina milk tea." I felt uneasy and followed. To my surprise, George was standing at my front entrance, looking travel-worn. "Mom, he doesn't have shoes," Nina said, furrowing her brow. Caught off guard, I handed George Leo's slippers out of necessity. "Those are Leo's," Nina pouted. "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy will buy Leo a new pair," I said, pulling Nina's little hand. Then I felt a burning gaze on me and instinctively glanced at my chest, realizing I was wearing a camisole. While still scrambling, the doorbell rang again. George casually opened the door and took a tan foil bag from the delivery driver. "Nina milk tea." Nina cheered, reaching excitedly for the bag in George's hand. George took off his shoes, without wearing Leo's, and walked into the living room, one hand holding the bag, the other in his pocket. Like a little dog, Nina followed right behind, full of anticipation. He slowly took out the milk tea, inserted a straw, and motioned for Nina to hold the cup with both hands. Her eyes fixated on it, she did whatever George said and finally took a big sip, letting out a satisfied sound. "Mom, can I drink milk tea while playing on my tablet?" she pleaded with hopeful eyes. I nodded. She bolted to her room with the milk tea in hand. After she shut her door, I finally had a moment to address George. Instead of "Mr. George," I simply asked, "George, why are you at my house?" He sipped from another cup in the bag, too sweet. Then he went to the entrance, pulled in his suitcase. "I want to shower," he said so matter-of-factly, like he was at his own place. I childishly tried to push him out, but ended up in his embrace instead. "Listen," he said with ease, "raising a kid takes a lot of money, doesn't it?" His words were like a slap, waking me up. Just a little kindness, and I had forgotten I was the vulnerable one here. "Be good, I'm going to shower," he released me with a casual smile. With another person around, I took out more food from the fridge, keeping my hands busy while my mind wandered. My nightgown was now a simple cotton one, but suddenly, a pair of damp arms wrapped around my waist, and his wet hair tickled my ear. "I've never seen you in this kind of nightgown," George whispered. To please him, I usually wore gowns with straps. Showing this domestic side in front of George was a first for me. "Mommy." Nina's voice came closer. George let go like he'd been shocked, putting some space between us. "You finished it all?" I asked. "No," she dragged the word, "Mommy said just a little, so I only drank a little." "That's great." I wiped my hands on my apron and ruffled her hair. "Nina, how about looking at your picture books for a bit? Dinner will be ready soon." After the milk tea wore off, Nina turned her attention to George, showing a big interest. "Mommy, who is he?" I shot a look at George, momentarily at a loss. "I'm your mom's coworker," he squatted. "Do you know what a coworker is?" "I do." "Like Leo and Mandy," Nina boasted, anticipating praise. "Not exactly," George started, but I interrupted, "Nina, why don't you let the uncle read you a storybook?" I realized my impulsiveness after speaking and anxiously watched him. He slightly furrowed his brow, so I quickly clarified, "George, unless it's inconvenient?" "Nah, I've read to friends' kids before," he said, crossing his arms. I exhaled, feeling a touch emotional. This was Nina's first time spending with her dad. After dinner, George led me away. Even though we had been intimate many times, I still felt nervous when it was just us. "How old's your daughter?" he asked. "4," I lied, subtracting a year. "She delivered via C-section?" George wondered. Instinctively, I wanted to touch the scar, but he beat me to it, leaving my hand resting on his. We had clasped hands countless times before. Each time, in the heat of the moment, I clung to him like a drifting plant, and his palms were burning hot. He tightened his grip. Was it painful having a kid? I tried to stay calm, unsure of his intent. Did he know something? It would be a lie to say it wasn't painful, but since he's gone, I need something to hold on to. I used the made-up X as a shield. George squeezed my hand harder. "You two must have been close." Though his voice was flat, the pressure in his grip told me he wasn't happy. "I don't want to bring up the past anymore." I broke away from his embrace and left. I couldn't leave Nina alone at home. He didn't say anything, half reclining against the headboard, with a dim light shining down on him. I couldn't see his face, but I knew he had no intention of stopping me. First thing when I got home, I checked on Nina. I always loved staring at her face. People always say daughters look like their dads. I was really afraid of seeing George in Nina's face. Good thing Nina still had baby Chub. She didn't look much like anyone, just like any other kid. Put her in a group of kids, and even I, her mom, might not spot her right away. But while we were eating dinner and sitting together, those subtle expressions and little movements, I closed my eyes, not wanting to think. Women are emotional. Even though I didn't feel much for George initially, it's different now. I seem to have fallen, even having this crazy thought of telling George that Nina is his daughter. But then what? Would George want Nina? Would he want me, even if he wanted Nina? I put out my cigarette and hid the pack back where I got it from, the tobacco smell filling the balcony. I opened the window, letting the cold air hit me. It was time to end this relationship. Someone posted photos of George and Nina interacting at the annual party in the company chat group. Do you guys think Helen's kid is George's? Although they weren't explicit, everyone knew what it implied. No way. Helen looks plain as heck, not George's type. Don't spread rumors. Helen's fiancé died in a car accident, the baby's posthumous. An old employee defended me. You all with your loose lips, Nina's already fatherless, do you have to add gossip? More colleagues started speaking up for me. Man, I can't deal with these people. Mandy was more fired up than me. How does Nina even look like George? Nina's so adorable. Leo chimed in, all huffy, George is nowhere near as cute as Nina. Before Leo finished, George cleared his throat behind him, with a client nearby holding back a laugh. Come on, our George is royalty. Leo didn't skip a beat. How could we dare, just admire from afar? He turned naturally, pretending. George, you're here. George gave him a look and strode away. Scared me half to death. Leo leaned on Mandy. How does George walk without making a sound? Mandy, help me deliver this file to George. Leo pleaded with a pitiful face to Mandy. You don't dare, I don't either. Mandy pushed him away. Don't lean on me, don't take advantage. Leo sent a pleading look my way. No choice, I had to do it, being in the hot seat and all. George, is she really your kid? Do you believe it? I barely raised my hand to knock before their conversation floated from the office. Wouldn't be so bad if she is. The client added, daughters are little angels. I don't like kids. George's icy voice, especially sweet little girls, can't handle them. Standing by the door, my face turned pale. So he didn't even like kids. Why read to Nina then? Once calm again, I knocked on the office door. George, there's a file for you to sign. Come in. He took the contract, signed it. Helen. Don't bring the kid to the office anymore. You're not underpaid, no need to feed her here. He finished and handed me the signed contract, not sparing me a glance. Sorry, George, it won't happen again. Faced unchanged, I apologized straight away. George, you're too harsh. The client said. I shot a grateful look at the client and quickly left that suffocating space. Nina, do you want to leave H-City and live somewhere else? I asked while putting her to sleep. Mom, why leave H-City? Nina blinked wide-eyed at me. Sweetie, just hypothetically. I patted her head. Where to? When would we leave? Nina pressed, my teacher said we're going on a study tour this winter. Mom, can I go with my friends? Once she was asleep, I checked my mobile banking. I had enough savings for a life back home with her. Come over. An unexpected message popped up. I pretended not to see it. The other side texted again, I know you're awake. So what? I turned off my phone. It wasn't long before the doorbell rang. I hurried to open the door, afraid to wake Nina. George once again stood at my doorstep, with a slight smirk as if everything was going just as he predicted. George, please stop coming around. I kept my head down. Unfamiliar men at home isn't good for Nina. Upset? George grabbed my hand, which I shook off. About this afternoon? Not upset, I said. He pinched my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze, playful. Just because I don't want your daughter at work? You eat at my table, live in my place, what's your gripe? A little tantrum adds spice. He pinched my lip. Too much, I don't like it. He lifted me, expertly finding the master bedroom, tossed me onto the bed. Mommy, Mommy. Nina cried from outside. George locked the door with a smirk, holding me down with one hand. Mommy, open up. Nina's little fist not loud, but it cut deep like a knife in my heart. George, are you insane? I fought to get free. Nina was crying. His dark eyes locked on me, unyielding, like a machine void of emotion. Kids crying, can't you hear? I kicked, but he held my ankle firm. I don't like kids crying. He leaned in like a mad dog, heavy breathing, but I like it when you cry. Taking him off guard, I bit him hard. He released me, touching where I bit him. I broke loose, hurried to open the door and held Nina close. Mommy, I'm scared. Nina dreamt of a big bad wolf taking Mommy away. Her eyelashes wet with tears, crying brokenly, Mommy, can we sleep together? I kissed her forehead and nose. Dreams aren't real, Mommy loves you most. Holding her, I walked to her room, but she refused. Mommy, I want to sleep in your room. Nina, Mommy will sleep with you. I nudged her little bum up, don't be afraid. In the wee hours, Nina slept fitfully, frequently opening her eyes just to check if I was still there. George didn't come looking for me, and I didn't hear any door closing. I guess he went to sleep too. Nina said she was scared and didn't feel like going to preschool. Nonsense. I tapped her little nose. Kids are always full of energy. She pouted and negotiated with me. How about Nina has egg tarts for breakfast? It's been ages since I had some. If Nina gives Mama a kiss, Mama will make egg tarts. I pretended not to agree. Mama, kiss. Nina kissed my cheek twice sweetly, then suddenly gasped. I turned to see George, all smug-like, coming out of my room. Morning, Nina. He then calmly pulled out a chair and sat by the table. Mom, why is he in our house? Confusion was all over Nina's face. The light bulb in Mama's room broke, so this uncle came to fix it this morning. I feigned calmness, worried George might say something with the chill of a blast freezer. Nina stared at George for a moment, then sat in the chair next to him and asked, I'm having egg tarts for breakfast, what about you? George looked at me instead of her. Whatever your mama's making, I'll have it. Nina's little face scrunched up, contemplating. You want egg tarts too? Then you have to kiss Mama. Kiss Mama? George playfully smirked, sure. He even started to get up. No need, everyone gets to eat. I managed a smile. After dropping Nina at preschool and coming back, George was still around. Since I began thinking of leaving him, I've been bolder with him. Why are you still here? Actually waiting to fix the light? I asked. What about you? George sat on the beige couch, his long limbs a bit sprawly. Why aren't you at work? I need to go to the bank, I said quickly, not wanting him to find fault. I've already informed HR. HR didn't tell me. George, I said, standing over him, you're meddling too much. Leaning down to meet his eyes, I teased, or have you fallen for me? Miss Helen, maybe you're overthinking, George replied, standing up from the couch. We business people always aim to maximize interest. Your cooking is quite good. I thought maybe you could handle my meals too. Thanks for the compliment, George. I turned my back on him. It's the last day of the month. Let's end this arrangement here. The extra money will be returned to your card this afternoon. Are you sure you want to end such a good deal, Miss Helen? He held me tight from behind. Truth is, I enjoyed our collaboration. Are you sure you won't reconsider? I pulled his hands off me, to be honest, George, you're not paying enough. I could find someone else who doesn't expect meals with it. Helen, he got serious, I don't give second chances to others. Perfect, I don't like taking steps back either. I boldly met his eyes, showing him my resolve. Helen, I'll be waiting for you to come back to me. I had to break my promise to Nina. After sending back the excess money to George, I handed in my resignation and took Nina to my hometown. The old house, uninhabited for years, had an unmistakable mustiness. I arranged for cleaners to come in, and we stayed at a small motel in the meantime. Thought Nina would be disappointed, but to my surprise, she was excited and curious about the old house, asking questions non-stop. I took Nina to see Grandma and also visited my parents. My parents had been set on divorcing back then. They had packed, arranged transport, and even planned to leave town once the divorce was finalized, but never gave a thought to their child. On their way to the Civil Affairs Bureau, they had a car accident. The divorce never happened, and neither did they survive. Grandma always urged me to let go, saying grown-ups have their burdens. But I resented them. If they were set on divorce, didn't want a child, why bring me into the world? Mom and Dad, this is my daughter Nina. It's ironic, they nearly divorced, yet are buried together, sharing a headstone. Nina, let's make this our home. I pinched her cheek. Mom, can the uncle still find us? She asked. Her question caught me off guard. Which uncle? The one who fixed the light. He's not coming to see you again. Great. Nina suddenly jumped down and hugged my leg. No one's here to take Mama from me. I chuckled and comforted. Why would you think he'd take Mama away? When Anna wanted my cookie at kindergarten, she looked at me like the uncle looked at you. Then why did you offer him egg tarts? I was scared Mama might like him. Nina said seriously, I didn't want you to be sad. Nina. I hesitated, but some things are hard to say. At home, there are some old photos Nina loves to ask about. I tell her about her great-grandma, grandma, and grandpa. Nina, do you remember when we burned paper before? Trying to recall, Nina wrapped her tiny arms around me, promising to always be there. Finding a job was surprisingly smooth. The county elementary school's accountant had moved away, and I took over their position. Across the street lived an elderly couple who had moved here, and they were always warm to me and Nina. Occasionally overwhelmed, I'd send Nina over to learn painting from the old gentleman. One day, after knocking and receiving no response at their door, I assumed they took Nina on a walk when I heard noises from our place. Opening the door, Nina was by the couch playing with blocks, and there was a stranger with her. He stood up awkwardly from the couch, sorry for coming in uninvited. Nina insisted on coming home to play with her blocks, and her grandparents didn't want her unsupervised, so they had me accompany her. Turned out he was the grandson of the elderly couple next door. It's cool, you're a guest Nina invited over. I waved my hand. After a few visits, I got familiar with him. His name's Michael, studying for his master's abroad. Helen, if I knew, I would have brought you an umbrella. After the meeting, our class had a dinner, and Nina got left at the house across the street by me again. It's okay, a coworker gave me a ride back. Oh, got it. Michael chuckled. Nina said goodbye to her brother. I waved goodbye to Nina as we left. Not long after we got home, the doorbell rang. I thought Nina forgot something. Michael brought it over, but it was someone unexpected at the door. Don't shut the door. He wedged a leg in the door gap, making it tough for me to close it. Helen, is Nina? Right then, Michael opened his door. The atmosphere got awkward and tense. Helen, it's Nina's hairpin. He handed it to me, standing next to George, not wanting to leave. I had to let them both inside. Nina seemed to not recognize George. She casually leaned next to Michael, directing him to change the TV channel. Nina, don't you remember Uncle? George cautiously tried to take Nina's hand, but she moved away. He didn't seem prepared for Nina's cold reaction. His hands hung in the air before dropping. He whipped out his phone, typing away, and a few moments later, some takeout tea arrived. George acted like nothing happened, inviting Nina to have bubble tea. I frowned, about to stop him, but heard, "Thanks, Uncle, Nina doesn't drink bubble tea anymore." "Nina, it's fine to drink one occasionally." He handed Nina the bubble tea with the straw in. Nina didn't refuse, but just when a glimmer appeared in George's eyes, she passed the tea to Michael. "Michael, adults can have it." George finally broke. Manners kept him from snatching the tea back from Michael, but he wasn't happy. "Nina, Uncle will come by tomorrow to see you." He got up, stumbled, and walked out looking lost. I wanted to say he didn't need to come back, but his forlorn look stopped me. George left shortly after, and Michael soon did too, taking all the bubble tea. "Nina, you're a kid, no bubble tea. Uncle will buy you yogurt tomorrow." Nina watched Michael leave, looking like a little sad creature. "Nina, do you really not remember that, Uncle?" I asked. "I do," she replied. "Then why?" I barely finished my sentence when Nina asked back, "Mom, is Uncle going to be my dad?" I was stunned, struggled to speak. "No, he won't." "Then we're strangers." Nina blinked. "We shouldn't talk to strangers." The next day, George came again. This time he brought lots of gifts, dolls, princess dresses. Nina didn't accept any. He was at a loss, looking at me with pleading eyes. I panicked. Is George being so good to Nina because he knows she's his daughter? Thinking back on his conversation with a friend, did he impulsively do a paternity test? I quickly dismissed the thought because he said, as long as I'm willing to come back, he could treat Nina as his own daughter. "You said you wouldn't give me another chance." I brushed off his hand, smiling. "I regret it." He suddenly hugged me tightly. "I really regret it." My arms hung by my side while he held me, "But I don't regret." George looked in disbelief, kissing my lips aimlessly, even trying to open my mouth. I just stood there, indifferent. He pressed my hand to his chest. "Can't you feel anything at all?" I said nothing, showing him my fitness band, heart rate normal. "Helen, you're so cruel." His eyes filled with confusion. "Didn't you regret nothing after leaving me?" "No regrets." My voice was soft but firm. "Fine." George rubbed his face vigorously. "One shameless act by me, George, is enough." George came and went abruptly. Life with Nina returned to normality. Before heading back to school, Michael asked if I'd remarry Nina's dad. "He seems pretty impressive." He shyly scratched his head. "If not, my family and I really like Nina, you know. Maybe we'll remarry," I blurted out, not clarifying that he thought George was Nina's dad. "Makes sense." He awkwardly laughed. "Who wouldn't like you or Nina?" When Michael left for school, Nina clung to his leg and cried for a long time. "Nina, I'm not gone for good." Michael held her in his arms, amused and helpless. "Unless you want to come with me abroad. I'll find a kindergarten there for you." Nina took it seriously, telling me to pack her bags. I was pissed and punched Michael twice. When seasons changed, Nina caught a cold and had a persistent fever. I took her to the doctor. He looked serious, saying we might need to wait for expert consultation. "Mom, when are we going home?" Nina leaned weakly on me. My heart sank like a stone. I swallowed several times before realizing how dry my mouth was. "Doctor, does she have to stay here?" I asked, trembling. "Have someone bring her clothes. The final results aren't out yet." "Okay. Nina, be good here with the doctor, Mommy's going to the bathroom." I flashed a desperate look at the doctor, tears already spilling over. I rushed to the bathroom, stifling cries. My Nina, my daughter. Thankfully, after consultation, Nina was okay. I let out a sigh, collapsed, trying to calm down. The lead specialist stared at me, finally asking, "Is Stella your mother?" Hearing that name after so long froze me. I nodded, dazed. I knew it. You look just like her. The specialist suddenly brightened. Years ago, Stella showed me your photo. It's been so long. I never imagined, she suddenly burst into tears. Now you have a child of your own. If Stella were here, she'd be so happy. I quickly pulled out a tissue from my pocket and handed it to her. She wiped her eyes and told me to wait for her in the office. Hearing Stella's name again didn't stir any emotions in me, but Mary got really excited. She mentioned she was my mom's college friend. Stella was an excellent student back in school. Even though Mary was looking at me, I felt like she wasn't really seeing me. If it weren't for the accident, she said, your mom would definitely be more outstanding than me. All I knew was my mom being my mom, and nothing else about her. When she and your dad decided to get a divorce, she had already received her graduate school acceptance. Mary let out a long sigh and said, she got married right after college and soon had you. Going back to school was a tough choice for her. We all tried to persuade her to leave you at home. Mary sounded guilty. A person's energy is limited, it's impossible to both raise a child and study. Helen, a child always comes first for a mom. When a child is around, a mom will always prioritize their kid. In both your future and hers, we advised her to choose her future. But Mary sighed deeply. Your mom insisted on taking you with her. I was stunned. Mary, you must be joking. Neither of them wanted me during the divorce. That's impossible. Mary's expression turned serious. Your mom personally called me. I saw my mom pack the luggage. They only headed to the Civil Affairs Bureau once their bags were packed. I gave a wry smile. That can't be. Mary looked puzzled. She even asked me to find a kindergarten for you? In a flash, something clicked in my head. Mary, let me take Nina home from the hospital today. We'll visit you in a couple of days. Back home, I couldn't wait to open that long sealed door. After the car accident, my parents' luggage, together with the past, was locked away in this narrow room. The clasps on the suitcase were rusted. With a crisp click, the clothes inside were revealed to me, not just my mom's, but mine too. A lake blue leather notebook lay quietly among the clothes, its sheen long gone. I carefully opened it. Besides chronicling my childhood, the ink trails showed the complex worries of a mother. Helen can speak now. Her voice is beautiful, she could do broadcasting one day. Will Helen despise me for not having a job? What should I do? Lately, he's been coming home late. What's he doing out there? I'm getting more anxious. He's fighting with me over our child. Helen must stay with me. I couldn't finish the diary, feeling unable to turn another page. All these years, what was I really resenting? Nina held my face with her little hands. Mom, why are you crying? Nina, Mom is the biggest fool in the world. That's not true. Mom is the smartest in the world, and so is Nina. Finally, winter break arrived, and so much had happened this year. Michael returned for vacation, and Nina became his shadow, even ignoring her own mom. George, as he promised, never reached out to me again. On New Year's Day, I took Nina to visit my parents and grandmother. That night, for the first time, I dreamed of them. In the dream, my young parents were in a heated argument over me, neither wanting to give up custody. Eventually, my dad compromised, letting me stay with my mom, on condition that she wouldn't hide from him with me. The dream shifted to the day of their accident. Grandma wanted me to say goodbye one last time, but I stubbornly refused. Every time Grandma brought them up afterwards, I covered my ears, unwilling to listen. I didn't understand Grandma's complicated look back then, but as an onlooker in the dream, everything was crystal clear. Everything around me felt like a carousel, and I chased after their fading figures until suddenly I heard Nina's voice. On New Year's morning, she greeted, Mom, Happy New Year. Nina, wearing red pajamas, climbed into my arms using both hands and feet. I wiped away the tears from my eyes and hugged her. Happy New Year, sweetheart. Every year from now on, will be blissful.